everyone. Welcome to this video on first steps into flow, which is second video of this flow series. Before going into it, first let's recap previously what we have discussed. We have discussed about what is Salesforce flow, and then we also discussed about type of flows. Like we had four types of flows like record trigger flow, screen flow, platform event trigger flow, and auto launch flow. Then we also understood like how Flow is replacing other tools like workflows, process builders, and many places of related to Apex classes and triggers we can go for flows. And lastly, we also understood the advantages of Salesforce flows. Now, let's dive into today's topic of what we are going to discuss. The first thing is we'll be introducing about Flow Builder, the tool which is used to build flows. Next, we'll also create a simple flow using Flow Builder, which is a screen flow. Next, we'll also understand the core elements of Flow Builder and Flow. And lastly, we'll also see for few scenarios like screen flows and auto launch flow, how to grant access to the users using for the flows. So let's see with an example now. So once you have logged in into the system, just in the setup, go to the setup and start typing flows. And I'm into the flow page where on the top you have something called new flow. Let's click on this. So this is a screen where you see you have to select either use template or start from scratch. For now, we'll be using start from scratch and click on next. Now you see various types of flows as we already discussed, like we have discussed about screen flow, record trigger flow, platform event triggered flow, schedule trigger flow, auto launch flow, and there is some other option called record trigger orchestration. And we also have so many other flows which are part of the five flows which we have already discussed. Now let's select screen flow and click on create. So once you are into this area, this is a flow builder where you'll be building the flow logic and everything. And you see here, there are two options like auto launch, auto layout, and free layout. Auto layout is like Salesforce will automatically give you the layout, like based on the inputs that you have selected and based on the elements that you have selected, it will automatically map those elements together. But when you select free form, you have to drag manually and you have to map it manually. Like if I select something like screen, let me select something like assignment. I'm just showing you this. Okay. So the difference is now you have to manually add in this way. But for the auto launch flow, auto layout flow, it automatically creates the mapping for us, the connectors between each element and each option. So let's delete this first and then go ahead. And so in this section, what we are going to see is we'll be creating a simple screen flow to accept inputs from the user for creating a contact record. For that, the first step is we need a form where you'll be entering the information about the last name, first name, and email. So for entering the information in a form layout, we need something called screen screen element. Okay, we will discuss about this element after completing this example. But yeah, just select screen element. So this is the place where you will be creating a kind of a UI form where you'll be dragging multiple details on this and you'll be creating a form for us. Now let's start with naming this. I'm just naming it as contact form. And we have something like configuring the headers and configuring the footers. Like the footers are pause, previous, and finish, right? If you want to hide some things, like if I want to add the previous, then I can hide the previous button. If I want to hide pause, I can hide. So these will be discussed later, but yeah. So like similarly, if you want to hide the header, you can hide the header. So once the label is created, let's not hide the Now, what I need? First, I need a text element to enter the last name. Sorry, first name. So just type. So this is the place where you can get all the elements, like in LWC, how you can have the different elements for the UI. Similarly, in the screen flow, you have the same thing. Just drag an element on the screen and just give some name. So you have to give the name. So first name. So I have, and the API name is already taken. And if you want to make it require, you can make it require, or else you can leave it like this. So there are many various options in this, which will be discussed later in the coming sessions. But yeah, for now, this is the way we need to drag one more element, like last name. Let's type last name. And want to make last name as mandatory because uh, for a contact record, last name is a mandatory field, right? So for that reason. And I just also want a email field. So just type email. Okay. Just give the name, customer email, contact email. Okay. This is a API name. So and the label is here. Okay. So we'll leave it rest of the fields in this way. So okay. Now click on done. So once this is done, now the next step is to insert the record, right? So just select in the data section, we have something called create records. So insert contact. So from the record variable, no. So we need to manually select which object you want to insert. Select contact, then start adding. So this is a new feature that is introduced recently. Like it will automatically identify for this particular object what is a mandatory field. So last name is a mandatory field, right? So automatically it's giving you an option to have that field whenever you're creating a new record. So now from here, so you need to assign, right? Now the last name of actual contact record should be assigned with the form value. So the form, screen form is this contact form. In that, the first value is first name. Sorry, this is the last name. So this is last name. Now, similarly, the first name, contact form, and first name. And lastly, we'll also add email, contact, contact email, and the value. Okay. So next thing is, once the record is inserted, I want to store that ID of that record in a field. For that reason, you have to check this checkbox called manually assign variable. So what is it does is store contact ID in a variable. So first you need to create a variable and then store it. So how we will create a variable? There are two places. From here you can create, or from here you can create new. So for now we'll just use this place. Click on new resource. This is similar to in Apex, we'll be creating a normal variables, right? In the same way, in Flow, we can use variables, formula. There are various things that we can create. We will discuss on this, but yeah, I'm now creating a simple variable to store the ID of the contact. Just click on that, give the name, contact ID, select it's a text type, and I'm leaving these fields. I'm not touching these fields. I'll explain you this in the next sessions. Click on done. Yeah, now I'm storing this information. And there are one more option is like suppose you want to insert only unique data, not duplicate data. Sometimes it happens like you will be having so much of duplicate data in your system. You want to avoid that. Then you can have this logic enabled so that it will automatically match the records and it will not allow you to insert the records. But for now, we are not using that thing. Yeah. So that's the thing. We have completed a simple flow, screen flow, and let's start saving. We have to give a proper naming convention. What will be the naming convention is I want to create a contact record, right? Uh, create contact record. Okay, you have to write a description. This screen flow accepts input from user and creates a contact record. Yeah. And for now, I'm running this with, see, similarly in Apex, we can run the logic in multiple ways. Like you want to run Apex with sharing, without sharing. In the same way, if you want to run flow with a user context or a system context, you have to use these values. As of now, I'm running this total flow with the system context. So I'm just using system context without sharing. And this is a type is screen flow. And then next, we have something like source template, original flow, and we have the version of the flow, latest API version. And we also have the interview label by which we can identify the flow current version which is running. So whenever we want to debug flows or any errors, so this will be helpful for us. Just click on save. Once save, we can use debug, but I'm not using debug for now. I'm just activating. So once the flow is ready and your testing is done, you have to activate it to work. So without activating, the flow will not work. Okay. I'm clicking on activate. Now it's ready for testing. Let's go to the home screen where I want to. So there are multiple places because this is a screen flow. There are multiple places you can add the screen flow. You can add it on a home page. You can add it inside a LWC, or you can add it in a record page. You can add it as a button, calling on a button. So there are multiple places you can deploy this particular screen flow and auto launch flow. So the one way is first way I'm just showing you. I just want to add a screen flow here. Let's click on edit page. I'm just adding that flow component. So in the components list, you have something called flow. Just drag that and then select the flow that you have created. Create contact record. It's a one column. If you want to hide display based on the conditions, you can use the filter conditions. Otherwise, we can just leave it. Just save it and then go back. Now you'll be able to see. Now I just want to create a contact record and just check whether it's working. Can't. Well, so this is the name, and we can't, and madhu.com. So this, if you see this option, it's mandatory. So you have to surely give, if I remove this and click on next, it'll not execute. So let's give the value and click on next. So now if you see here, we don't know whether the record got created or not. It's just coming back to the first screen. So why this happens is in the flow, after insert, we are not doing anything. Like we are not displaying anything. Normally, the behavior of ScreenFlow is once you click on finish, automatically it will refresh and come back to the first screen, like the first screen of the ScreenFlow, because it has completed, even though it's an error or not error. But normally, once the it goes success, automatically the flow comes to the first page. So to understand whether it's working or not, what we'll do, we'll just create one screen element, and here we will just write output as the label, and then I can display a text message. So what I'll do, I'll use display text. If you want to just display any text, you can use display text as the one of the component, and the name is contact record success. Okay, okay. We need to give without spaces because it's an API. Now here you can write whatever the message you want. Okay. If you want, you can also insert merge fields, but yeah, for now we are not doing. Successfully inserted contact record, and the ID is ID is we have from the resource, we are storing the ID of the resource is one of the field, right? Contact record. So we are just using that as a merge field. Now you can make it colorful, make it blue, bold. Okay, done. So after the output screen, when you click on next, automatically it'll come to the first screen. But we have an idea like now, okay, is something got created. So let's test. Before testing it, we'll just go and see whether previous record got created or not. Yeah, Srikant Madhu, it got created with the details. So now let's test whether we are getting the test success message or not. Test 4, user 1, test 4, at the rate c.com. Okay, now you are able to see successfully inserted contact record and the ID is this. If you go and see whether we got that record, and once we click on finish, again it comes back to the original screen, the first screen that we called. And here, a record got created. So this is how a simple flow we can create. Now let's jump into the next topic, the core elements of flow. So as we saw while developing the simple flow, we saw different elements that we were able to use, right? Like we were able to use screen flow and we were able to insert the records and we were able to use some resources. So how that is being organized? Let's see. We have two things. One is element section. That is what we saw in the thing. These are the elements like add an element, right? You see add element. So these are the different kinds of elements that we have. Like we have different in different categories. Let's see what all categories we have. We have interaction. Like interaction is like you are interacting with this flow. So we'll be using as an interaction. Like one is screen flow, screen, and other is action and subflow. Next, we have logical. Like in normal programming, we have logical building blocks, right? Similarly, here also for flow, we have like assignment, decision, loop, transform, collection sort, and collection filter. And lastly, related to the data related elements, like if you want to use data and you want to create or get the data or update the data or delete the data, then we'll be using data elements. Those are these. And we also have something called resources. Resources are like mainly the placeholders, like you want to store some information and want to process that information, right? You need to hold that information in some resources, some variables we call in Apex programming. So similarly, we have different kinds of resources, like we have variables, like a simple thing. We can also use constants, like if you don't want to change the value, you feel like the value is not changed throughout the flow, then you can use constants. And if you want to use formulas, like I want to display an information based on first name and last name together, then I can use formula. Then there is something called text templates, mainly used for emails. If you want to draft any emails with merge fields and everything, then you can use text templates. Then we have few other uh, resources like choice, collection choice set, record choice set, pick list choice set, and stage. Stage is like different phases, like if you want to track, right? Normally we have a progress bar, so we can use in for that kind of a purpose. And we have something like choice, collections choice, like these are different elements that we can, like different kinds of resources these are called. We'll be using it in mainly in screen flow. So this is about the core elements of any flow. We should know like each flow has these are the core elements that we will be working, and few core elements will not be available for record trigger flows, but for few like screen element is not available for record trigger flow. So let's see next. So that those are the things that we have discussed, and we have resources. And next, the important thing is, while coming to screen flow and auto launch flow, we have to give access to the users to work on flows. Like if they want to use the logic of flow or they want to work with flows, like if I want to see on the screen, like on the home tab, I can see this screen flow, but when I click on next, it may throw an error because I don't have the permissions to access the flow. So in that reason, the reason for that is we need to give some access, grant access to the flows. So how this is done? There are three ways that we do. The first step is we can give edit access for the individual flow directly. If you go and see at the flow level, for screen flows and auto launch flows, you have some option called edit access. So even though you're not giving at the profile level and permission set level, and there's a scenario where only this particular flow I need to give access to certain group of people, then I can override that behavior, and then I can directly add those profiles for this particular uh, flow only. But if you're not checking this, what does that happen is, if the user has run flow or manage flow permission, then he can access that flow. Or if flow user in their user record is checked. So these are the other two ways where I can give access to the flow. Let's see that information. So the first step is giving edit access individually. The second way is the flow user. So where is that information? If you go to user level, you see some checkbox called flow user. If this is checked, then you will be getting the access. Okay. And then there is one more option called run flow or manage flow in the profile or permission set. So if you go to the profile, have something called manage flow or run flow. Run flow. So this checkbox. So these are the three ways where you can give access to the flow or grant access to the flows. And by that way, the individual agents or the users in the Salesforce system can work with flows. Okay. Next, we'll also see some settings, configuring settings, which are really important to understand. Those are called process automation settings. So when you have a new system, you should come here and update a few of the checkboxes here. So one such checkbox is which is very important is enable lightning runtime for flows. And yeah, this is the main checkbox that you need to enable it. Then only you can run the flows in the lightning view instead of classic mode. And you can also give the default workflow user information here. So based on this user, the flow will be running. And you can also have this other information, which I'll be discussing in later again. Yeah. So this is about process automation settings that we need to do. So what's the next step that we will be doing? So next, in the next session, I will be discussing on introducing on the record trigger flow, one of the types of flow. And then we will understand what are the different types of record trigger flow that we have. And we will also understand the save order process for the flow. Like whenever a record is saved, normally we have a save order flow process. Like we also need to understand where this flow fits into that. And lastly, we'll see some of the examples on record trigger flow. So this is about the end of this session. Thank you very much.